So welcome everybody to the session. Really lovely to have you here today. And I'm looking forward to making sure that we can go through a few different questions and getting some help for you for live online learning. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name's Jo. I own Lightbulb Moment, and we've specialised since 2013 in webinars and virtual classrooms design and delivery, usually for teams of people. And we thought during these challenging times we'd offer some Q&A and see if we can get some conversation going to help support everyone. Also, I'm joined by my trusty sidekick. Mike, can you tell us what your role is, please? And also, why do we have the same last name?
Certainly. So Jo and myself are siblings and we both run Lightbulb Moment. And today I'm here in the capacity of a producer. So if you need anything, let me know in the chat.
Thank you so much, Mike. Absolutely brilliant. And I just want to make sure we've got those tools open that we're going to be using. So you can open up your participant panel, and what you'll be able to utilize then is that we've got some yes and no ticks and crosses. They're really useful for just getting involved. So let's see if you can go and click a yes or a no right now. I don't mind which one you do. A yes or a no, entirely up to you. Thank you very much. Now I can see those coming through on that attendees panel, and hopefully you can if you're live in the session as well. So we will use that a little bit later on today. Also, please make sure that what you do is you have your chat window open. You might need to wiggle your mouse on the screen. The chat should come up, and then you can see all the chat that's going on in there, and that's where you are asking your questions. So please pop your questions in there. That's what we want to have a look at today and answer those. And our theme today for the chat is going to be around this virtual session structure. And this is the thing that we shared. We shared a whole blog about it. And the whole idea was to take what you would normally do face-to-face and just weave in a few things that you would do differently for your live online sessions, be they a webinar or a virtual classroom. So this is where we're going to get started today. You can actually ask any question you like, but that's what we're getting started with around our virtual session structure. So what is it that you want to ask about? What is it you need help with? Let's go to the chat. Mervyn, thank you for sharing a book link for us. And Julie, Julie says, having listened to all of your podcasts in the last 2 weeks, we knew someone had, Julie. I feel like I'm talking to two celebrities. Julie, you have made my day. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is the virtual session structure that we use. It's the way that I kind of strategize and decide who is going, what is going to be in the session. From the opening, including discussing the basic tools, and I did just that just now, and I didn't go into all sorts of different things, just the basics that we need for the session that we're running the activities right now. After that, it's about asking a question. So this is where I bat everything right back out to you, and hopefully you'll put some questions in the chat window. So is this the kind of thing that you do for your sessions? Are you looking at this and thinking, well, it's just the same as face-to-face? Or are you thinking, how do I do this? Or it's really useful to look at this way. So you need to let us know your questions. The theme today is our virtual session structure, but you can ask on anything live online. Jane says it's definitely really useful. Thank you. Our pleasure, Jane. I think hopefully it's just about going through those steps and not missing something. So when you're new to this, hopefully that's useful to kind of think about that. Heather says, I'd like to discuss the how of breakout rooms, please. That's a really good question, Heather. And the how, that could be, we run 2-session courses on this. So we need to be a little bit more defined, Heather, in that question. Breakout rooms are a really lovely feature of most virtual classroom tools where you can send people off into their own rooms to go and discuss things. So Heather, can you ask a little bit more, even if it's a couple of questions, ask a little bit more specifically about that, please. Margaret asks, what do you do if you do not have the option of a producer? That's a really good question, Margaret. What I've got here, and Mike will share a link to the template that you can download of this, is this is a template of our facilitator guide, and what you'll notice is that there is an option for the producer. Oh, what is going on my screen? It's supposed to be, here we go, it's supposed to be drawing, there we go, for the producer column. So this is what Mike's doing during the session. However, to answer your question, instead of producer in there, I could just call that technical. And in there, I'd separate out what's going on in the session, such as opening polls or something like that. And what that's doing then is making sure that the technical stuff isn't forgotten, it's not lost in the session. So that's how I do it, is separate those two things out so that it's still planned, it's still organized, but I don't have to rely on somebody else. Julie says, what are your favorite virtual icebreakers and energizers? Oh, Julie, what a great question. There is a book by Cassie Labori, which is all about that, called Interact and Engage, and she's got loads of activity ideas in there. I think, to be really boring in answering your question, Julie, it's about linking up the content that you're planning to do in your session, as well as the software tools that you need to use. So if you know there's an activity where you want them to use the stamp tools, it's like, well, how about having an icebreaker where you maybe have things on the screen and get people to stamp the ones that they like or their favorite or they've used or whatever, something like that. Also, another thing that you can think about is, what are the types of activities you want in your session? Do you want lots of verbal, lots of people speaking and volunteering to put their hands up? Make that part of your icebreaker. So I like some quite cheesy fun things, if I'm honest, but I tend to write some more serious things. So I think it's about you, your personality, knowing your group, but things using the tools such as Spot the Difference. One that I always like that somebody recommended is have pictures of chocolate bars and which one are you? Are you crunchy because you're a bit mad, or are you boost because you've got loads of energy? So there can be some good fun things. I'm sure other people in the chat window can share their ideas too. Heather says, do you have producers in each of your breakouts? So it depends, Heather, a little bit on how complicated the breakout session is, i.e. the activities inside the breakout, and how many producers you've got. So I'm used to either being just me, or I'm very lucky now I've got Mike being my producer, but I might have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 breakout rooms, so I can't have a producer in each. But your sessions you might have designed differently, and you might have whoever is working with you, and you do have a person in each breakout, but that depends upon your activity and what it is you're facilitating. Certainly you can do that if you've got the people available to you, or you can actually move from room to room, just like you would do in a face-to-face environment. What else have we got? Margaret said that was really helpful, my pleasure. Oh, the link you shared, Mervyn, was to Cassie's book. That's brilliant, thank you very much. She's absolutely lovely. And Mike's sharing some stuff in there. So Mike, where am I at? I think, is it the session structure activity I'm answering next? Is that where I'm at?
Yes, I believe so, Joe. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So Tara says, are there any links to session to structure flow, including activities? So Tara, I think from my point of view, the short answer is no. I've got this this blog post. So if you go to here in the community, is a link to the blog post, and that tells you kind of why to do each bit at each section. And Mike previously shared to you the facilitator guide link, and that will give you an outline of the way to flow that. But the flow specifically is going to be what you need in your sessions. It's a little bit hard to kind of say do this then this, but those two tools together should help you out. My pleasure. And there was a question from Heather. Do you have advice to guide subject matter experts away from their talking head and lecture preferences? Oh, that is a good one. I really like that. I've got a feeling that might have to become a little bit of a blog post later on. I'm going to make a note of that to come back to. I think the advice for that, and then everybody please in the meeting, please do share what you've got in chat as well, because we've all been in this situation where the subject matter expert just wants to content dump. They just want to talk at people because there's so much going on in here, and they think if they just talk or write or PowerPoint slides, then all of that will be absolutely fine. And just by reading it, people will just be able to kind of go, yep, by osmosis, I've learned. So then, Annette, yeah, that's a good one. Get them to record themselves and listen back to see how interesting they find it. That's pretty cool, because they might just switch off. And I think it's perhaps being very consultative with them and not telling them, no, you can't do it, but being very consultative with them and kind of saying, okay, so how did you learn this? Because they didn't learn by osmosis usually. Usually they've learned it by trying it, playing it, breaking it, all sorts of different things. So it's about saying, well, how can we replicate a better version of that experience for other people? And then just trying to help them a little bit with, this is how people learn. So they don't have to be an L&D expert. This is our job, but just to highlight some of those little things about getting people involved. So Mervyn, thank you very much for those checklists. And Heather says, lawyers, both a blessing and a curse. Yeah, and those subject matter experts, it could be any topic at all. But then when you're talking about something that's got much more of a legal element or a compliant element, so anything legal, maybe health, pharmacy, insurance, anything with a compliance issue element too, there are those things of, but they have to know X, Y, Z. They have to know all of this legal stuff, or they have to know the exact wording. So it's about finding the way around, yes, we need to give that to them, but also how can we structure in some activities so people go from it being broadcast at them to really understanding it and being able to apply it. And if you discuss that with your subject matter expert and come up with case studies or ideas or suggestions of where that is, that can be good too. So what other questions do we have? We've got the virtual session structure is our theme for today, but obviously you can ask things on different topics as well. And yes, I think I've answered that question from Tara about structure, flow, including activities. And the activities that you come up with are going to be very specific to you. Going back to this facilitator guide, the reason I like sharing this is that if we look through things like this technical column here, we've got a chat activity, then there's a whiteboard activity, there's another chat activity. Later on, we might have a tick and cross. Later on, we might have something else. And what it can allow us to do is if we use something like this, we can look through and see, going like, okay, we've got 30 seconds here, that's fine. We've got an activity here, great. An activity here, great. Well, we've got 2 chat activities. Is that okay? Like, yeah, actually, it's probably fine. Or could it be that actually we've got 3 chat activities on the top, maybe we need to get people to unmute their microphones and things like that. So some of those things might be quite useful too. So hopefully kind of that will help. So what other questions do we have around maybe breakouts was something that come up, and about the types of sessions that you're designing or you're delivering. So this time is for you to ask the questions that you have at the moment. Julie, thank you. Is there an optimal length for a session? Could you run a 3-hour session with a break? Could you run a full day session, 2 3-hour sessions with a lunch break? Okay, so we've got lots of different options in there, Julie. The unhelpful answer is it depends. It depends on the topic, how deep you go into it, how many activities you have, on your facilitators and stuff like that, as well as your attendees and how new they are to kind of live online learning. In more of a depth answer, Mike has shared with you a link to a blog post that we've got about the virtual classroom in numbers, which goes into a bit more detail and will be helpful for that. And guys, in the chat window, what's your experience? Have you run 3-hour sessions with a break? Have you run all day sessions where there's kind of a break in the middle? So you definitely can run a 3-hour session with a break. You have to make sure it's quite a good break in the middle, a good sort of 15 minutes, I would say, to give people that time away from the screens and to refresh. So you can do that. You can run a full day, such as 2-3-hour sessions with a lunch break. That's a lot of time at the computer, a lot of time focusing and concentrating. So I always say that you can, but you have to make sure you design lots of really good activities, including things like the breakouts, where people can have maybe a more relaxed conversation on webcam with each other, or they have activities where they're away at their computer doing something on their own, or maybe they even make a phone call to someone else. So you have to have some really good activities in there, and obviously it not just being kind of lecture and broadcast in that time. The other thing to think about with this is partly about the attendees, but also from you as a facilitator point of view. So 2-3-hour sessions in a day, even with lunch in the middle, that's quite a lot to go and facilitate. If you're newer to this, I think by the end of that day, you're going to be very, very tired. Even as somebody who's used to doing this, I would find that I would be tired at the end of that day as well, because it's quite a lot of work to go and do. But if it's the right thing to do for whatever reason, then that can be a really good way. You've just got to design it and deliver it really well. Natalie says, I'm a new in-house L&D manager for a charity. So any good resources you can share for free online learning, please do so. So please do go and share those in. Natalie, make sure you go and have a look at the Charity Learning Consortium. Martin Baker runs that. It's kind of a conglomerate, if you like, of charities. And he supports them, and they get kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Economies of scale on e-learning purchases. They've got a Slack community. Oh, Natalie, you have already. Fantastic. We've obviously got our community. We've got our blog and our podcast. We focus around webinar and virtual classrooms. But if you guys have got other kind of resources on online learning that can help Natalie out, please do go and chuck those into the chat window. That would be great. And Mervin's doing that right now. Thank you very much. Julie says, I've got delegates booked onto a full day sessions that were face-to-face and some want to go ahead with the full day. I wasn't sure. What I'm hearing is the key is to include good, engaging activity. Yes, it is, Julie. And this is the thing about whether it's right to do that or not. In some situations, if they were booked on a day, if it's been in the calendar, it's been scheduled, all of that good stuff, there are some good reasons to keep that as a day. As you say, the activities have to be really good, and they have to have time to go and do stuff as well. So what I would say is your face-to-face session won't convert immediately into live online. You have to put some things in. Even just things like this session structure that I've got on the screen here will really help. The breakout rooms, if you're ready to use them, can really help. They are slightly more advanced things. So that's something to look at. We do have some podcasts on stuff like this. So we've got a podcast on breakouts. We've also got a podcast on design. There's a part 1 and a part 2. And I'm sure Mike will go and find those. I'll give you a link to the podcast overall. So if you go and look at that link, there's a list of all of our podcasts there. And the latest one that's up there also includes a little bit more about converting your current face-to-face session to a live online session. So there's some more stuff in there that you might find useful as well. I think there was a question up here from Annette that I missed. Oh no, I didn't miss it. It was the next one. Thank you, Annette. She said, if you had the content, how long do you schedule for designing a session? Oh, that's a really good one, Annette. Annette, in our latest podcast, which is on that link that I just shared in the chat window, we reference some work by Cindy Huggett. And Cindy Huggett's research of people designing live online sessions. Excuse me, I've just got a slightly drippy nose. What she's shared in there is that people told her that for every hour of interactive, engaging live online session, it takes 21 hours to design that. So there's a number that is something to work from. Something to take into account for that is, of course, it will depend. If you've got the content already, if it's your content, your delivery, and you know it inside out, then it's going to be maybe quicker. If you're having to go and speak to subject matter experts, get things signed off, learn a tool from scratch, then obviously it's going to take a little bit longer. So it does depend on lots of things. What I say is, as an absolute minimum for an hour session, I need at least one day to go and do the design on that. But if it's somebody else's work that I'm converting for them, that's more likely going to be 2 or 3 days. So there you're getting towards your 21 hours there. So it depends a little bit on how much you know already. What else have we got? Jane says, Joe's community, oh, thank you, is always the first place you go. Thank you very much, Jane. That's lovely of you to say. And Natalie says, how do you do breakout rooms? What do you use? So Natalie, it will depend on the software platform that you've got. First of all, you need to make sure that you've got a software platform that does breakout rooms. So for example, WebEx Meeting Center doesn't have breakout rooms. Neither does Microsoft 365 or Teams. That doesn't have breakout rooms either. If you have Zoom, for example, it does have breakout rooms, but you have to switch it on. So you need to go into the zoom.us website, go to your account, go to setup and switch it on. If you don't switch it on, it won't be there and it will be frustrating for you. Other software like WebEx Training and also Adobe Connect, for example, they have breakouts. So make sure if you're selecting a platform that you select one with breakouts, if that's what you want, or you switch it on if that's what you need. And what we've also got to think about then is how is it that we want to go and run our breakouts. So you do need to make sure that you explain it, that you test it and run it yourself, and that you have a really good question, you know the timing, and you have all that set up. Again, going back to the facilitator guide, this is where having all this mapped out on a piece by piece can really help you go and deliver that and actually kind of put that together. So Natalie, hope that answered your question. You said that's really useful. Do let me know if there's a follow-up to that. Heather says, we're moving an evening 3-hour session that used to include a meal to a 2-hour virtual session with Q&A to break it up. They're planning on starting at the same time as they did when they provided the meal. I'd like to start later to avoid meal times. Any thoughts on that as a structure? What a great question, Heather. And I love the initial idea of having the meal and everything first. I don't know whether that would work if you did the meal online, if everybody sat at their desk eating. I'm not sure there's an option. But okay, so you're thinking here, we've got 3 hours, we've cut it down to 2 because we're not having the meal. That seems sensible. I think you've probably got the right idea about when you're planning your start time. Heather, can you just drop into the chat? Are you thinking like 6 p.m, 7 p.m, 8 p.m? What's your thoughts on that? I think I'd go the same as you. I'd go kind of slightly later if that was the plan on the meal time, to allow people that time. But there is another logic to this, is that if people are at home anyway, because people are self-isolating, at this time, is working it a little bit earlier going to be sensible, because people don't need to commute home, they don't need to necessarily spend the time cooking and then get onto your session. So so you're thinking 6:30, 7 o'clock. I'm thinking something like that sounds good to me, without knowing more about the session and the people involved. Oh, it's in June, so you don't really know yet. I'm thinking, Heather, it's personally, I'm going to assume that we're still in a version of social distancing and working from home at that point. So I would go for something like 7 o'clock. That gives people a chance to get their dinner, get signed on a little bit early and get going. That's my gut instinct. And if everybody else thinks differently, obviously you have the chat window for that. So thank you very much. That's a great question. Mike was sharing loads of links. and Cindy kind of covered Cindy Huggett stuff and the links there. That's all really good. Mervyn says, becoming an ATD member is something that I'd recommend for everyone on this webinar if you're not already affiliated. Thank you, Mervyn. So the ATD, the Association for Talent Development, is an American organisation, similar kind of to the CIPD that we have in the UK, and they have various benefits of webinars, training courses and conferences when we're not in lockdown and things like that, including some local chapters in the US. They do have a European conference they've run in Brussels the last few years. That's usually around December time. I haven't been to it. I hear it's really good. Whether they're going to run that again this year, I don't really know. Okay, thank you, Mervyn. Okay, 5 minutes left, Mike. Is that all we've got? Geez, time goes quickly when we've got all of these questions. So we do have time for a few more questions. Mike, what are your observations on things that the discussion so far? You've been more into the discussion than I have.
Yeah, I think just one of the things I was going to say is you definitely don't need to have a producer run a session, but it can be handy. And I think it's one of the points that maybe if you are going to be facilitating by yourself is to think, what would I want a producer to do? Or what skills am I lacking here? And then maybe you need to manage that in the session. So if you know that you can't get to the chat, maybe you need to be the person that says, okay, I'm only going to come to the chat at certain points, but you can still use it, for example. And another one is the breakout rooms. I think it's one of those points that it can be a really good activity and to keep things fresh. But like Joe has said, you need to really play around with it before the session, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's learning how the breakouts work, especially in a particular piece of software. It works differently in Zoom to WebEx to Connect and so on. So that's a really good point, so that you're confident, because I think the biggest thing is if we're not confident, that comes across. And I know I feel that when I use something different or haven't used something for a while, and I can feel myself going, it just doesn't run as smoothly. Heather asks, I'm looking for resources to train my new virtual classroom trainers. Any resources for hands-on training? So you need to be a bit more specific there, Heather. I have shared a link in to chat. We've got loads of resources available. We've got podcast, we've got a YouTube channel, we've got the free community and a blog and all sorts of different things. So if you have more specific questions, you can go and share those in the community if you want one. Oh, Mike, yes, that's a good one as well. We've got a curated list of loads of resources, of course. That's why you have a producer, for the things you forget. Dawn says, oh, stuck on a call, just made it. Just as we're finishing, Dawn, but we have recorded the session, so do not panic. What I do want to ask you is any final questions, obviously, in the chat. Dawn, don't apologise, it's no problem at all. Heather says that her virtual classroom trainers are scared to go live. Completely understandable. They need to get their hands into it to try it out. I was thinking of doing something like this, an Ask Me Anything session about their hobbies internally to give everyone a chance to play each role. Oh, I love that. Absolutely love that, Heather, because what you're doing is you're getting people passionate about their thing, and then the virtual classroom or the platform is secondary. So that is a really good one. And Julie, thank you so much, is saying that our podcasts are really brilliant as well. So we've got loads of different topics, everything from confidence to design to platforms. And if you start right at the beginning, hopefully there's a journey through that. But that's a really good idea, Heather. I think that's a fabulous one. I'd like to just move into a little bit of reflection now and ask you what it is that you've picked up today. What have you learned? What's your light bulb moment from today? So have a little think, what's top of mind for you, and pop it into the chat window. And Dawn says, get a producer. I can recommend a producer if you need one. Just drop me an email if you need a producer. We do have one available. Sadly, I can't loan Mike out. He's a little bit too special just for me. But we do have producers that we work with. So what's your reflection today? What have you picked up? What have you learned? Just drop it into the chat window. Natalie said, I've learned so much today. Thank you so much, everyone. And that's the joy of us all coming together. We can all learn from each other. Thank you. Annette says, for me, it's just do it. Yeah, start small, Annette. Just do a little session, do a test, do a pilot, build it up. But definitely, if you don't get your feet wet, you're never going to learn to swim. Julie says, create engaging, interactive exercises. Yes, Julie, we've got so many resources across our various websites and platforms about it. Hopefully you'll have some stuff there. And once you get going, it's great fun. Heather says, there are more resources available than I thought. Yeah, even just from us, let alone everybody else. There's tons and tons and tons out there. Dawn's going to watch the recording back tonight. You're more than welcome to, Dawn. And if you've got questions, just like you've done before, we've got that community. Tara says, listen back to the podcast. Yeah, hopefully you won't get sick of me and Mike, but there's lots in there. Natalie says, I'm looking for an L&D mentor if anyone's interested. Natalie, go and post that on our community. I'm sure somebody will come back to you. So just go and sign up to the community, completely free, post that question, and somebody will come back to you. Dawn says, good advice, get started. I've been doing freebie pilots for patient clients. I bet they've been loving your sessions, Dawn. Jane says, the approximate 21 hours to design and develop a 1 hour interactive session. It's a useful stat. Yeah, it might be less, might be more, but it gives you something to kind of have in your head. Thank you. And Margaret says, reassurance, I can do it myself without a producer. You can. The first 4 or 5 years I was doing this, I didn't have a mic. Well, I mean, he's my brother, so I did have him, but I certainly didn't have a producer. I had to do it all on my own right from the very beginning. So, you know, all I'm trying to do is help you kind of shorten your learning curve and not have as much pain as I did. And Heather says, don't be surprised if I send my new trainees to some future Q&As. You can blame me for future attendees from Iowa. Oh, Heather, I love that you're going to do that. That's brilliant. They are more than welcome. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. We are at the end of our session, and you know where we are. You know we've got our free community. We do training for teams as well. We've got our podcast. You know all of that stuff. You've been great today in sharing all of your information and your questions. We do have another one of these sessions in a couple of weeks' time. Jump on the community. You'll see the link there that you can go and register for that. And we will hopefully see you soon. On behalf of Mike and myself at Lightbulb Moment, thank you very, very much for being with us, and we'll see you soon.